Some secrets were never meant to be uncovered. In the dead of night, shadows guard untold stories. Yet even silence holds its own whispers. Through dim hallways where truths lie buried in darkness, investigators search for answers, finding only questions. Boundaries crossed, lives shattered, and the evidence remains just out of reach. Piece by piece, the mystery unfolds.
Lieutenant Robertson watched with a solemn gaze, his grip firm around a hot cup of coffee, as Detectives Hayes and Gomez examined the fragments of a mystery that had cast a shadow over the town. The disappearance of Karmel and Sonny was no ordinary case. They had been missing for over a month, leaving behind nothing but whispers and worry. But it was more than just Karmel and Sonny. Others had vanished from the same neighborhood, their traces dissolving into the night. And one name, one address, lingered in the detectives' minds: 7441 Churchway. A house that seemed to swallow secrets whole, buried beneath layers of silence. The detectives knew this was no ordinary investigation. Detectives Hayes and Gomez walked down the sidewalk, scanning the houses with a focused investigative look. They spot a middle-aged black woman standing outside her house, looking somewhat uneasy. "Excuse me, ma'am. Can we have a word with you?" The woman turns toward them, looking slightly wary, but nods. "Yes, how can I help you?" Detective Gomez pulls out his notepad, preparing to jot down anything she might say. Detective Gomez: "We're investigating the recent disappearances in the neighborhood. Anything you can tell us might be helpful." The woman hesitates, glancing down the street, almost as if making sure no one else is listening. She shakes her head slightly. "Look, I don't know much, and truth be told, I'd rather not get involved." Detective Hayes exchanges a quick glance with Gomez, sensing her reluctance. But before they can say anything more, the woman speaks again, lowering her voice. "If y'all really want to know something, you ought to go talk to Mr. Willie across the street." She gestures, pointing her finger in the direction of Mr. Willie's house. "He's claimed to have witnessed things, insights that make sense to him, even if others thinks he's out of touch." Detective Gomez raises an eyebrow, glancing in the direction she pointed. "Mr. Willie, huh? Thanks for the tip." The woman nods, stepping back as though she wants no further part in the conversation. As the detectives turn in the direction of Mr. Willie's house, the woman suddenly blurts out, a hint of caution in her voice. "You might want to be careful. Not everyone around here takes him seriously. He's seen things the rest of us choose to ignore." With that, she turns and heads back toward her house, humming softly, leaving the detectives standing there, puzzled, yet armed with a new lead. The detectives crossed the street, heading toward Mr. Willie's house. Before they could ring the doorbell, Mr. Willie appeared from around the back, wiping his hands on a rag. "How can I help you, gentlemen?" he asked, eyeing them curiously. "I'm Detective Hayes, and this is Detective Gomez. We're with Louisville's Special Homicide and Missing Persons Unit," Hayes began. "We don't want to take up too much of your time, but we're investigating the disappearance of your neighbor, Karmel Jenkins. She hasn't been seen for the last 2 months. Mr. Willie frowned, a sarcastic laugh escaping him. "What took y'all so long to get here?" "I reported her missing a month ago," he replied, irritation lacing his voice. The detectives could tell he'd been waiting for this conversation. "We're following up now," Gomez said, keeping his tone measured. "Could you help us out with any information?" Mr. Willie cut him off. "What exactly do y'all want to know?" he asked, eager to share what he'd observed. Gomez began asking questions while Hayes took out his pen and notepad, scribbling notes as they spoke. From the doorway, Mr. Willie's wife, Cora, listened quietly, arms crossed, observing the conversation. Mr. Willie leaned closer. His voice dropped. "There was a bright light over Camel's house one night," he began. "A bright light?" Hayes echoed, a hint of disbelief in his tone. Mr. Willie nodded. "Yes, sir. That light comes and goes, and I've seen it more than once. The strange thing is, it only hovers over her house, never moving, just still right above her place." Hayes raised an eyebrow, but Mr. Willie continued. "And then there's the mailman, Jim. He hasn't been back since he went up to that house. We had to help him to his truck. He couldn't move. Just stood there stiff as a board, like he'd seen something no one should ever see." He shook his head slowly. "And Buddy, my dog. One night I took him out and he went wild, barking, growling, jumping like something was out there. I had to drag him back inside. Now, every time we go out, he just stands there growling at that house, like he knows." Detective Hayes glanced at Gomez, both of them thinking about the warning they'd received earlier. Hayes cleared his throat, ready to dismiss Mr. Willie's story with a polite smile. "Well, Mr. Willie," Hayes said, extending a business card with a smirk, "if you happen to see any more of those bright lights, be sure to give us a call." Mr. Willie didn't take the card. "No point in leaving that," he said coldly. "My wife and I won't be needing it." From the doorway, Cora finally spoke up. "The light's real." "I saw it too," she said firmly, stepping out onto the porch with her arms crossed. Mr. Willie, visibly annoyed, turned to her. "Cora, would you be so kind as to escort these gentlemen off our property?" Hayes, visibly uncomfortable, extended the card again, this time toward Cora. "If you change your mind." She shook her head, refusing to take it. "Did you not just hear my husband?" The detectives exchanged a glance, uncertain what to make of Mr. Willie's account. As they turned to leave, Hayes reached into his pocket, pulling out a cigarette. He lit it, taking a deep drag, then exhaled slowly, watching the smoke rise and dissolve into the air. He took in another pull, then flicked the cigarette to the ground, grinding it under his heel until it was snuffed out. The weight of the case was starting to settle on him. He'd dismissed Willie's claims, but something about the old man's conviction stayed with him, tugging at the edges of his thoughts. The drive back to the station was quiet, neither detective uttering a word, not even about the case.